Our special guest is the face of international tax policy and has played a key role in the evolution of consensus on BEPS project. We thank him for his 37 years of distinguished service in the Indian IRS. Please welcome on stage the standard bearer of excellence and integrity as a senior government official, Mr. Akhilesh Ranjan, the member of CBDT, We would also like to congratulate you, sir, for making it to the elite list of top 20 most influential voices in the international tax fraternity in 2018. And over to you.
I think it's all right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Taxsutra, for inviting me once again. I have been attending your annual conclaves and happy to be here once again this year. Thank you for that very kind introduction. So yes, before we, of course, the topic of future of international tax is something which probably think tanks like the OECD would be better equipped to talk about. But then I think they are too busy right now sorting out problems in the present rather than think about the future. So I think I'll do that part of the thinking for them. Before we talk about the future of international tax, I think we should look at where we are, because it's important to understand the road that has been traveled, what progress has been made over the years in order to really understand where we need to go and where the issues are. So over the past couple of decades, we have seen a liberalizing of tax regimes. We have seen a gradual decline in tax rates almost across the world, culminating really in the US tax reforms of 2017, which had a major impact on global tax policy. So there has been a gradual movement there. India has also lately stepped in. Of course, we made our intention clear almost 5 years ago when we said that we will reduce corporate taxes along with phasing out of incentives and broadening of the tax base, and that policy statement still holds good. What we have done, of course, right now, the ordinance, it should not really be viewed as corporate tax reform. It is a one-on-one measure, which is aimed to be a stimulus which can lift sentiments and which can make people or industry think about investing at least. So I think those objectives have been met by that measure. It remains to be seen as to how well this measure, this stimulus, translates into actually resulting in more investments and more growth. But then the reform process is on. The minister has said on many occasions that she would be looking at all aspects of the tax system when the next budget is announced. The report of the task force on direct taxes is there, available with the finance ministry. I know it hasn't been made public, so people are still not fully aware of what's in it. But it is a package of measures which is trying to comprehensively revise the Indian tax system, not just the corporate structure, but also the personal income tax structure, and even the administrative structure, which actually now has become extremely important. So all that is to come. I think India is also on that road to tax reform, in line and in sync with the global movement on reduction of tax rates, liberalizing of corporate tax structures. And at the same time, there has been an emphasis on preserving tax bases and on checking tax avoidance strategies in order to ensure that every country gets its just revenue. And hence the BEPS movement, the project, which started in 2013, brought out its reports in 2015, A significant amount of work done in the BEPS project. Major achievements, I think, in those minimum standards which were brought out as part of that project, which sought to put in a check on tax avoidance through the abuse of tax treaties, through lack of transparency, to better transfer pricing, various measures out there. And the world has been implementing those measures. There is a mechanism which is reviewing the implementation of those measures. So in all respects, I think the outcome of the BEPS project is something that we can say has been a good outcome for the world of tax. And then there was a realization that the BEPS project, of course, had its limitations. It did not go far enough in addressing two key issues which were part of the BEPS project. One being the challenges of the digital economy, and the other being on transfer pricing. Probably the BEPS recommendations did not go far enough. It only sort of tried to make it more refined, the mechanisms and the methodologies that were being used. So on these two aspects, there was a shortcoming of the BEPS project, something which work remaining undone. And that has now been taken up. Again, you must be aware, the inclusive framework, which is not just monitoring the implementation of the BEPS recommendations, it is also discussing further on these two matters, mainly the Pillar 1 and the Pillar 2 consultation paper, which has come out very recently at the behest of the G20, which is trying to bring out a unified approach on taxation in a digitalized economy, and also to address or to evolve a sort of minimum tax proposal which can address the larger issue of tax avoidance. So that work is going on, and it is supposed to be to lead to a consensus sometime by late 2020. I do not know whether that consensus will be achieved at that time. By that time, efforts are certainly on. A lot of discussions are going on. Perhaps we will reach some sort of a consensus on these issues. But then, is that the end of tax reforms? And I think no. And I think that's only a start, a beginning of the whole process of relooking at the whole global corporate tax system. The Pillar 1 document, if you see that, in the unified approach, talks about greater allocation of taxing rights to market economies. That's supposed to be the objective. May I just hasten to add, ladies and gentlemen, I am now not speaking as the member of the government. These are my personal views on what is going on in the world of international tax and how adequate is that work and where we need to go. And that's the message I would like to convey out here. So the purpose of the Pillar 1, the underlying objective is supposed to be the greater allocation of taxing rights to market economies. And in that process, there is a mention that we are going beyond the arm's length principle. And both objectives are, I think, very noble thoughts, very noble sentiments. But then if you pause and look at what's the content of that unified approach, is it really going to result in a greater allocation of taxing rights to marketing economies, to developing nations? Is it really modifying or adapting the arm's length principle in the way that it should? Then I think there are questions that need to be asked and that need to be discussed. When this whole idea of taxation in a digital economy started, the emphasis was on new ways of doing business. One could carry out business in a jurisdiction without having a physical presence in that jurisdiction. There were new types of income streams, there were new types of business models, incomes which were not being captured by the current rules, and that was the realization which led to the initiation of discussion on the digitalized economy. But somewhere down the line, it was found that no, you can't ring fence the digital economy, so therefore you must speak of a broader concept, speak of taxation in a digitalized economy, because the entire economy is digital to one extent or the other. I think that's a fair thought. That was the right direction. When we started thinking, then we must expand our thought to cover a broader canvas. So yes, taxation in a digitalized economy should be the objective. But then when we started to look at concrete proposals on how we achieve this taxation, it seems to me that somewhere we lost our way. It seems to me that although we had started with the premise that we have to look at the challenges posed by these new business models, by the new income streams, we somehow diverted ourselves into some discussion which, although recognized that what the central aim was of greater allocation of taxing rights, is now thinking of solutions which are not really resulting in a greater allocation of taxing rights. My apologies to Grace, she's just come in here, but we will have a further discussion, I suppose, in the next session on this. But these are my personal views, I have made that very clear, not the views of the Government of India. Although they might be the views of the Government of India. I'm not so sure. So when we talked of allocation of taxing rights, it had to be a huge discussion. It had to be something which results in a transformative change in the world of tax. It had to be not just a tinkering with Article 5 somewhere or some profit allocation rules. It had to be a relook at what the rules of nexus should be. It had to be a relook at how allocation of profits should be made and a fresh thinking on that approach. So it was said in that there were proposals put forward. There was a proposal which concentrated on the user contribution, and we were happy with that part of that proposal, but it seemed to be very restricted in scope. And there's another proposal which talked about marketing intangibles, and that proposal widened the field tremendously. Now, this proposal went beyond the initial concerns of taxation in a digital economy. It sought to address problems faced by the difficulties in implementing the arm's length principle in certain situations, and that seemed to be the only advance that it was making. So when it talked about modifying the arm's length principle, it's not really a modification of the arm's length principle. It's just that where you realize that there are certain areas where the arm's length principle does not work, and then you say, all right, here we will bring in some new rules. So the approach as it is going in the inclusive framework on the discussion on taxation in the digitalized economy, I think is a faint-hearted and a very timid approach to reform of the international tax system. It is not something which is going to transform or revitalize the tax system. It is not something which is going to bring about a tax system where every country or most countries of the world can say that now we do have a just and fair system. We have to think, and the problem right now seems to be this reluctance to let go of traditional concepts. So we do talk about going beyond arm's length. We do say at various platforms that yes, the arm's length principle is no longer the complete solution. We must go beyond that. And yet when we talk of solutions, when we talk of models, we say that no, as far as the arm's length principle works, let it work. It's only that small bit out there where it doesn't work, yeah, then we'll think of something on that. What is required, in my view, is a complete relook at how we operate this arm's length principle. Is it really relevant when you're talking about a digitalized economy? We are saying that there is no ring fencing of a digital economy, that the whole economy is digitalized. When you're saying that normal standards of arm's length cannot work in some situations, well, why then say that they cannot work only in some situations? I think one should be ready to acknowledge that it may not work in all situations. And a fundamental relook at the arm's length principle is something that is required. So we haven't done that. We are not doing that at the moment. We are trying to look at solutions, trying to find consensus in a restricted sense, where we just get over this problem of situations where, as I said, the arm's length principle doesn't work. The final allocation of incomes where it is largely due to intangibles, that sort of a situation is being addressed. But that mixing up the whole thing of still allocating some profits on the arm's length basis, some profits on beyond the arm's length basis, we don't see where this whole approach is going to lead to. Or is it really going to come up with a solution which is acceptable and justifiable? The proposal that India made, and which was endorsed by the G24, most developing nations, try to steer clear of this, try to say that let's just take a view that the arm's length principle may not work at all. Let's take a view that we need to allocate profits in an entirely different way. The details can be worked out, the details can be made fair and equitable. But there can be no hodgepodge. There can be no part arm's length and part non-arm's length. And that's the essential feature of the SCP proposal. The nexus, which becomes the basic building block, which applies not just to cases of routine profit. You don't need a nexus of only non-routine or residual profit. You need a nexus for all types of profit in a digitalized economy. Because as again, at the cost of repetition, once you recognize that it is a digitalized world that we're talking about, then you can't just isolate one part of it and say that I will make a system, a mechanism to deal with only a residual profits. The nexus, if at all it is to be agreed to, it must be a nexus for all profits, all types of profits, routine, non-routine, residual, whatever you call it. And once you do have that nexus, then let's think of ways of allocating that. That's what the ACB proposal said. But in this whole discussion of trying to stick to traditional concepts of arm's length, trying to stick to and trying to maintain the nexus as contained in Article 5, I think, in my personal view, I think we have lost an opportunity to really transform this global system. As it be that as it may, India is aware, and we are aware that of the current economic and political realities in the world. The discussion will go on. The discussion will come to some conclusion. I hope that conclusion is something which does represent an advance in some meaningful way. India is a participant, and we will continue to collaborate internationally with the development of every consensus. But I think the road will not end here. And that's the central message that I wanted to convey today. When you talked about the future of international tax, in my view, there is a huge amount of work to be done. This consensus, that will be achieved, may resolve some matters, may make people happy for some time. It is something, it cannot really be something which can be said to set a standard for the next 30 years. So things are bound to change, and we have to then ultimately take the bull by the horns. We have to deal with that elephant in the room, or whatever you call it, that there is a need to allocate taxing rights in different manners than what has been done at present. I look forward to that situation. I look forward to those years. I hope I am still associated with international tax at that time. That's the message I wanted to convey, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much once again for inviting me over. I'm sure we'll have some very stimulating and scintillating discussions through the day and tomorrow. And these issues and these questions could perhaps be discussed in more detail in those sessions. Thank you very much.